I don't know about all the people out there. Oh, now I am? Okay. Got too much fellowshipping. All right. All right, everybody. We are in Nehemiah chapter 2. Nehemiah chapter 2. A little warm today, huh? We, I think Peg turned the AC, cranked it down probably around 1 o'clock today, and this is as good as it got. So, I mean, we're still thankful. We're still thankful. All right, so last week we were introduced to Nehemiah. He was a Jew living in the capital city of the Persian Empire. And although he was in the Persian Empire and he was working there, he cared very deeply for the people in Jerusalem and for the city, and for its restoration. And much like Ezra, when he finds out that there's issues with the people and in the city, that he prays. And he doesn't just pray, Lord, change him, Lord, fix him, Lord, smite him. He doesn't do that. He prays and he asks for forgiveness and mercy on his people, and he includes himself in that prayer as one needing repentance. He identifies with the people in their sin and in their rebellion, and he seeks the Lord for 4 months when he hears about the fact that the walls are still burnt down or knocked down, and the gates have been burnt with fire and all this stuff. And he prays about this for 4 months. He fasts and prays for 4 months. I don't think he was fasting for 4 solid months, because I think that's near impossible. But just doing a normal fast from time to time, it's a good thing. And so that's one of the things that we know that he did while he was seeking the Lord for guidance. So we're going to pick it up here in chapter 2, verses 1 and 2. And it says, "And it came to pass in the month of Nisan, in the 20th year of King Artaxerxes, when the wine was before him, that I took the wine and gave it to the king. Now I'd never been sad in his presence before, and therefore the king said to me, 'Why is your face sad, since you are not sick? This is nothing but sorrow of heart.' So I became dreadfully afraid." The dates here are pretty important, and it can get a little confusing, and just to kind of review a little bit about the time differences here. Nehemiah's brother came to him in the month of Chislev, and now we're in the month of Nisan. Okay. The month of Chislev is in November and December area. And we were told that the meeting occurred in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. And now we're in Nisan, and Nisan is mid-March or April. And it says we're still in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. This has kind of caused problems for people a little bit because, of course, Nisan comes before Chislev in the year. At least in our year, it does. And we got to remember that the Jewish New Year is not at all like ours. The Jewish New Year starts in Tishri, and that's around September, October time. And because the Jews have a different calendar, it's kind of different each year. So and it's kind of one of those things that we're looking at things through our own understanding or our own preconceptions about time and about calendars and stuff like that. Things can get really kind of confusing. When we remember that the Jewish day actually starts at sundown, where ours starts at midnight. So when the Jews are talking about a specific time of day, whether it's the first hour or the third hour or whatever, that basically goes from sundown to sundown. That's why the Passover starts at sundown. Every time they do a Passover feast. So Passover starts Friday night, goes all the way through Saturday until sundown. So just knowing that going into these, it makes it a little bit easier to kind of reconcile some stuff. The current Gregorian calendar did not actually come about till 1582. And it came about when Pope Gregory XIII replaced the Julian calendar as the official calendar of the Catholic Church. And he encouraged everybody in the Holy Roman Empire, what was left of it, to convert to this, just so that everybody had a common reference. And that's the same calendar that we use today. One of the most interesting things, I guess, about the Gregorian calendar is it was designed by the church specifically around festivals and holy days. But today it's used as a secular calendar, where you have Jews still keep their they use the Gregorian calendar as business calendar, but then they still use their calendar to measure when Passover is going to be, when the Feast of Booths is going to be, and all that other stuff. So the Gregorian calendar was originally designed to be a church calendar, but it has turned into a secular calendar. And then everybody who still keeps a different one, who was supposed to kind of assimilate, keeps their own. So all that to say, this is in the same year, in the 20th year of Artaxerxes. It's 4 months later that Nehemiah is going to go before the king. Now, we touched a little bit last week on Nehemiah's position, and when we hear that he was the cupbearer, I don't know about you, but that just kind of, to my mind, to my 21st century mind, that doesn't seem like a very important job. You know, you're the one that, Yol Cup Saya, that's kind of, it doesn't seem like it would be a really important thing. But actually, in this time, it was incredibly important. Because this is the guy who's protecting the king from being poisoned. He was one of the king's most trusted advisor, because the king literally had his life in this man's hands. He had to have unquestionable loyalty, because if the cupbearer could be turned against the king, then assassination would be fairly easy to do. So he would be the one that would be choosing most of the food and the wines for the king's court and for feasts. So remember, it had been 4 months of fasting. And he's the one that chooses all the food for all the feasts and everything that's going to be on the king's table. And of course, he would be part of that feast. And you can imagine this would take some real resolve. When you don't have a whole lot to choose from, maybe fasting's not that difficult. But you put the good stuff out, and oh man, you guys got some serious resolve. So now he's standing before the king, and the king knew Nehemiah very well. Like I said, they were very close, and he could tell there was something seriously wrong. He recognized a distinction between physical sadness and emotional sadness. Sadness because your tummy is not feeling good, and sadness because you're emotionally distraught. He could tell that there was an issue. And for some kings, this could be a potentially dangerous situation, because if you go in there with your emotion unchecked in the presence of the king, bad things could happen. He could make an assumption. Well, what are you so upset about? What's going on? A king that was, self-centered and only really thinking about himself would think something suspicious is going on. So Nehemiah is really kind of, he's kind of putting himself out there, and he's trusting in his relationship with the king. I think many times we are guided by fear. And I think that is natural, especially after you've got some years under your belt. You've seen things, seen the aftermath of bad decisions. I remember I was a lot more of a daredevil when I was in my teens. I was up for a lot of stuff and did a lot of dumb stuff, and especially behind the wheel of a car. But I never did this. This is I came across this video a couple of weeks ago, and I just had to kind of work it into the story, into a service somehow. But in 1979, there was a stuntman named Kenny Powers, and Kenny Powers attempted what was called the super jump. He would jump his rocket-powered Lincoln Continental over the St. Lawrence River, and that would be like a 1 mile long jump. They spent over $1 million and about 4 months worth of building ramps and moving earth to make this thing happen. Now, I just think it's hilarious that they picked a Lincoln Continental because, they are always been known for their aerodynamics and how well they should probably fly. I mean, it's basically a brick. And they put little tiny like winglets on the end, like that was going to help. And when Kenny Powers lit off that rocket, he reached 280 miles an hour before he reached the end of that ramp. But as soon as he was off the ramp, the front end of that car went straight up, and the car disintegrated. And it only actually went about 500 feet before it landed in the river. And he walked away from the whole thing. There's a lot of things that I think has kept me alive over the years, and fear is probably one of them. There are times when you just have that little thing right there. This is a pretty sketchy situation, Working in law enforcement, you have to kind of listen to those. If you don't, you can regret it. But there's also been times when fear has kept me from doing what God wanted me to do. Hey, go talk to that guy. I want you to go pray for that person. I want you to give to this ministry. Lord, I don't want to talk to that guy. I don't know that guy. I was just going to think I'm weird. What do you mean just go pray for somebody? Come on, Lord. I mean, I know I would think someone's crazy if they did that for me, Lord, have you seen our checkbook? Give to the ministry. We could be a ministry. We could use a little cash infusion ourselves. If you know anybody, Several times in my life when I think I really missed out on a blessing from the Lord because I was too fearful to actually listen. Courage is not the absence of fear, but it is the control of it. But he's going to go through this explanation about why he's looking like he's really sad. Verse 3, it says, "And said to the king, may the king live forever. Why should my face not be sad when the city, the place of my father's tomb, lies waste and the gates were burned with fire?" I always thought it was funny when you see, "O king, live forever," like they're fooling anybody, But it was just kind of more of a, like a blessing. And so it's a way of greeting, It's a way of showing honor to the king. Yeah, he obviously didn't think that the king was going to live forever, And it's kind of interesting. It's extended in modern times in places where they still have kings and monarchs to "long live the king." They still say that, or "God save the king" or queen. I guess it's king now. Charles is there, so long live the queen. It worked. How old was she when she passed? She was in her 90s, right? There's something to that. But notice the way he presents this information here. It says, "The city, my homeland, the place where my father is buried, is a pile of rubble, and the city is unprotected, in all the ways that might deter robbers and thieves, because the gates are burned to the ground, is basically what he's saying. And not once did he mention what city he's talking about. And there's a reason for that. The city, Jerusalem, had a reputation even through the kings of Persia and the kings of Babylon. This is a rebellious city. This is a city that you have to keep a pretty close eye on, because these people, they're very passionate and they don't like to be ruled over. And rebellion is in their hearts. And we know rebellion is in their hearts because they rebelled against God so many times as well. But some of the kings, that were especially in the Persian Empire, were guided by the Lord. They were generous and they were favorable to this city. But he's careful here not to mention the city by name. Look what else he doesn't mention. He doesn't mention the fact that these people are lazy. They've had 100 years to get this done. What a worthless group of people. He's careful to state the facts, but he's not laying blame on people. He's not running anybody down. And I think we can learn from that, because even if we think that people need details for a prayer, a lot of harm can be done by oversharing. God knows what people need, and a lot of times I don't think we can really trust ourselves with all the details. So when someone just needs prayer, you don't need everything. It's like, hey, I'm really kind of going through a time right now. Really, what's going on? Tell me all about it. Well, it's just kind of some family stuff. Yeah, what about it? You know what? Just leave it at that. God knows. God can help. God knows exactly what's going on, and you can pray with certainty that God knows the situation and that He hears you, even if you don't have all the details. But what he does here, it's really easy to separate yourself. We saw that Nehemiah included himself when he was praying. He was praying that, we are a rebellious people. We have failed you. We need forgiveness. We need mercy. And he has that same attitude when he goes to the king. It'd be really easy to go, you know what? I need to go over there and fix all these people because, they're a mess and I've got the solution. And Lord, King, I just, this is what I need to do. These people just need a leader, and apparently the leaders that are there are just garbage. And I need to go take care of it. It's not how he approached it. He did so by talking about the needs. And that's all that he needed to say. Just needed to mention the needs. Verses 4 and 5 says, "And the king said to me, 'What do you request?' So I prayed to God, to the God of heaven, and I said to the king, 'If it pleases the king, and if your servant has found favor in your sight, I ask that you send me to Judah, to the city of my father's tomb, that I may rebuild it.'" I think this shows the high regard the king has for Nehemiah, because he lets it lets Nehemiah know that the heart of the king. He's actually found a place in the heart of the king. Remember, and we can't discount the fact that he has been praying for direction and opportunity for 4 months to say what he's going to say. And God gave him the timing and the words to say. As employees, we are to treat our bosses like we treat Jesus, and that is not always easy. Well, for you retired guys, it's probably a lot easier. But for the rest of us, it can be a grind. But at times it's a real test. Do you really live by what you say you do? Do you really believe what you say on Sunday? Ephesians 6, 5 through 7 says, "Bondservants, be obedient to those who are your masters according to the flesh, and fear with fear and trembling, in sincerity of heart, as to Christ, not with eye service as men pleasers, but as bondservants of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart. For the goodwill doing service, with goodwill doing service as to the Lord and not to men. Notice when the king asks what he was requesting, it says that he prayed again. I don't know if this was just a quick prayer, give me the words, or, you know what, King, I'll get back to you. Let me go. I need to go talk to the Lord. It seems like it's probably one of those quick ones like, God help me. One of the most powerful prayers you could ever utter. Because it's usually spoken when somebody is in dire need of intervention from the Lord and they're broken and open to it. You've heard the phrase that there are no atheists in foxholes. And, I can't say that that's absolutely true. In fact, I was researching the term, and you have a lot of atheists that really hate that. And one of the ones I thought was hilarious is, well, if there were more atheists, maybe we wouldn't need so many foxholes. And I'm like, oh my gosh, really? That's where you're going to stand. When faced with danger or potential life-taking circumstances, a man who has never had much time for thinking about what's beyond death is suddenly confronted with the possibility that it is right around the corner. And I'm about to meet the God that I haven't given any time to. And maybe it's just I sure hope, that he's not real, but I have a feeling he is. Whatever the process Nehemiah went through here, he decides he's going to consult God before he continues speaking. And I think that's a great idea. And you look at the wisdom in the words that he chooses here, because he references his own record of service. If my service has been faithful, if my service has honored you, please send me. And not can I go, please? It's like he's asking the king, send me to do this job, because I will do this job. And I think that it's a very subtle thing, but what a difference in the way that his tone and his reaction. If I found favor with you, send me. And verse 6 says, and the king said to me, the queen was also sitting beside him, how long will your journey be? And when will you return? So it pleased the king to send me, and I set him a time. Now there's a significance here to the queen being there. And it just kind of seems like it's an odd little addition to have that in there. But because she was there, we know that this was not like a formal state dinner or a meeting of like all of the princes of Persia, because she would not be invited to those. This would be more of a private family type of an occasion, which is the perfect opportunity for Nehemiah to speak to the king, in a less formal way. And the fact that he includes her in this seems to maybe make us believe that she had a little bit to do with it. You know what? Let him go. You could trust him. Come on. Because the king counters with a question. Well, how long are you going to be gone? Presumably Nehemiah answered the king. We don't know what he said, but whatever he said pleased the king. And just kind of on a side note, again, I don't know how long he said he was going to be gone, but he's gone 12 years. We see this in Nehemiah 5:14. It says, moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year until the 32nd year of the king Artaxerxes, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the governor's provisions. So I doubt that Nehemiah says, it'll just be 12 years, king. He probably did underestimated the amount of time he needed. But when he gets there, he is such a valuable asset. A apparently the king had no problem making him a governor and keeping him there for 12 years. Verse 7 and 8 says, "Furthermore, I said to the king, if it pleases the king, let letters be given to me for the governors of the region beyond the river, that they may permit me to pass through until I come to Judah. And a letter to Asaph, the keeper of the king's forest, that he may give me timber to make beams for the gates of the citadel which pertains to the temple of the city wall, and for the house that I will occupy. And the king granted them to me according to the good hands of my God upon me." First thing he knows is he's going to need supplies, and he knows he's going to be needing a written permission from the king to get these things. And he knows that there's going to be opposition from the people on the other side of the river. So he needs the authority of the king to not only get passage through their land, but to get this project done. And we have a very unassuming little verse that gives us a window into the most important event in all of history. And that is, this leads us to Daniel chapter 9, verses 25 through 26. It says, "Now therefore, and understand that from the going forth of the command to restore and build Jerusalem until Messiah the Prince, there shall be 7 weeks and 62 weeks, and the street shall be built again, and the wall even in troublesome times. And after 62 weeks, Messiah will be cut off, but not for himself. And the people of the prince who are to come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary, and the end of it shall be with a flood. And until the end of the war, desolations are determined." Okay, so there was a man back in the 1800s named Sir Robert Anderson, and he wrote a book, a very famous book called The Coming Prince. Sir Robert Anderson was first a lawyer, and then he was a chief investigator at Scotland Yard. He was actually there during the Jack the Ripper times. He was involved in that investigation, although he didn't seem to get very far with that investigation. But he was a very, very meticulous investigator. And he started reading the book of Daniel, and he started calculating. Now there are a few other guys who have taken this on as well, and the reality is that we are in my opinion, very far removed from the triumphal entry. To be 100% sure of the date, I think, is impossible for us. But we'll kind of go over the gist here. And we'll use kind of Anderson's methodology. So, first of all, you have to remember, just like I said earlier, we have differences in days, months, and even years, because the Jews figured a year on a 360-day calendar. And so, when we're looking at this Daniel's 70 weeks, the word week is only basically another way to say 7. Okay, sevens. So we have 7 weeks, that's 49 years. And then 62 weeks, which is 434 years. And then finally, 1 week, and that's 7 years. That's a total of 490 years. Now, Daniel's 70th week is what we read about in the book of Revelation. It hasn't happened yet. So we have 69 weeks of 360-day years, and we get 174,880 days from the command to rebuild the city until Jesus walks into Jerusalem on the back of a donkey. And like I said, the 70th week has yet to come. The bottom line is, like I said, we have a difficult time. I read 3 different theories, and they all are within like a year of each other. And there's compelling evidence on all of these things. But at the time of Jesus is expecting them to know the day. He's expecting them to understand the prophecy of Daniel and to know the day that Nehemiah was sent to rebuild the city. They should have been able to calculate, the amount of days and be ready for the Messiah to walk into Jerusalem. And because they weren't, Jesus says this in Luke chapter 19, 41 through 44. It says, "Now as he drew near, he saw the city and wept over it, saying, if you had known, even you especially in your day, the things that make for your peace, but now they are hidden from your eyes. For days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment around you, surround you, and close you in on every side, and level you and your children within you to the ground, and they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not know the time of your visitation." Jesus expected these guys to know. And because they didn't know, 70 AD, Titus comes in and he levels Jerusalem again. And you guys have probably all heard the stories about the temple was overladen in gold on the inside. And basically a drunken Roman soldier tossed a torch into the temple and burned it to the ground. And all that gold melted into the stones around in the temple. And so to get that gold out, they had to remove every single stone from on top of another one. Fulfillment of prophecy that Jesus made happened in 70 AD. So no surprises here that Nehemiah did exactly what he said he would do. He was a man of action, not a man of talk. And now we're introduced to the opposition, and there will be plenty of opposition to this wall being built. The same way that we face opposition all the time, stuff we deal with is a little bit more subtle than what Nehemiah did, but discouragement is one of Satan's best tricks. He wants you to look like a fool in front of people. He wants to challenge your intellect. He wants to embarrass you because you dare trust the Lord. 1 Corinthians 1, 27 through 29 says, "But God has chosen the foolish things of this world to put to shame the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of this world to put to shame things which are mighty. And the base things of this world, the things which are despised, God has chosen. And the things which are not, to bring to nothing the things that are. And no flesh will glory in His presence." That's my life verse. I love that. I think that it's very true when you see the fact that all through history you see guys that are fairly uneducated that have just basically turned the world upside down for Jesus. From every single revival that has ever happened has been just one guy who God sent, who was faithful to preach, faithful to tell the truth, and God used him. And everybody else who's looking at this going, I don't understand. How does this even work? These people are crazy. Why? I mean, I remember reading about Billy Sunday, and how this guy would hold revivals all over the United States, and it was called Hitting the Sawdust Trail. If you're going to go see a Billy Sunday revival, likely you're going to get saved. You're going to hit the sawdust trail underneath that tent and go up front and get saved. So you can have faith that when God has told you to do something, even if it looks dumb to the world, even if it looks like it's scary, and He tells you to do it, you better do it. He's in it. If you don't, you'll regret it. Verses 11 and 12 says, "So I came to Jerusalem, and I was there 3 days, and then I rose in the night, and a few men with me. I told no one what my God had put on my heart to do in Jerusalem, nor was there any animal with me except the one which I rode." There's an old Japanese proverb that I think fits this. Vision without action is a daydream. Action without vision is a nightmare. Nehemiah is basically on an episode of Undercover Boss. He doesn't tell anybody what he's doing. hops on his little donkey, and he rides around, and he looks at the condition of the walls and the gates, and without any input from anybody else, he's just observing for himself. He doesn't need somebody in his ear going, you know what, we tried, but those people over there, they didn't want to be part of it. We tried, but this is why it didn't fail. He didn't need to hear any of that. He wanted to see for himself what the condition was and what was going to be needed to fix it. When I started at the state, I was hired as the assistant manager of the warehouse. And truth be told, my boss did very little to train me in that job. But she was good enough to tell me about all the people I need to watch out for. And all the people that, well, this is what this person's like, and this is what this person's like, and oh, you never trust this person. And I had to politely tell her, he says, you know what, I'd like to figure that out for myself. And she was kind of a little taken aback that I didn't value her insight. But she finally agreed, and I went out, and I started sweeping the floor. And I started throwing pallets around, stacking pallets. And I just started watching. And I started talking to people. And, while the staff was figuring me out, I was figuring them out. And I found out my boss had some things twisted. And that a lot of her opinions were biased. And they came from her own fear and insecurity. And so over time, developing a team from scratch, basically, worked out really well. So I like the way Nehemiah did this. He went to go view for himself. It's like, I'm not going to trust anybody else's opinion. I'm going to scope it out. Verses 13 through 16 says, and I went out by night through the valley gate to the serpent well and the refuse gate, and viewed the walls of Jerusalem which were broken down, and its gates which were burned with fire. And I went on to the fountain gate and to the king's pool, but there was no room for the animal under me to pass. So I went up in the night by the valley, and they viewed the walls, and I turned back and entered in by the valley gate, and so returned. And the officials did not know where I had gone or what I had done. I had not yet told the Jews, the priests and the nobles, the officials, or the others who did the work. It's important for a leader to check this stuff out for himself. Don't just rely on what you're told. And Nehemiah saw the worst than he imagined. There were even gates he couldn't get his donkey under. Proverbs 18:13 says, he who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and a shame to him. One of those proverbs we need to keep in our back pocket all the time. So after he's made a complete survey of the wall and the gates, he returns and he makes a plan for what he's going to say to the people. So verses 17 and 18 says, then I said to them, you see the distress that we are in, how Jerusalem lies in waste, and its gates are burned with fire. Come and let us build the wall of Jerusalem, that we may no longer be a reproach. And I told them of the hand of my God, which had been good upon me, and also of the king's word that he has spoken to me. So they said, let us rise up and build. And they set their hands to this good work. Now, I think Nehemiah might have been ready for a fight here, because he's calling the people out, and he's placing the responsibility for the condition of the city on the people. He's not overt about it, but he's like, look at this. I'm new here. You guys have been here a while. Look at the city. It's a reproach. People really don't like to hear that stuff. I don't know if he had this proverb ready to go, but it turns out he didn't need it. Another really good one. This is a great one if your kids decide they don't want to pick up their room. Proverbs 6 through 11. Go to the ant, you sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no captain, overseer, or ruler, provides her supplies in the summer, and gathers her food in the harvest. How long will you slumber, O sluggard? When will you rise from your sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep? So shall your poverty come on you like a prowler, and your need like an armed man. That's a great one. So full of imagery there. I love that. You can use that one on your teenager when they don't want to get up out of bed. Really good. Instead, though, the people embraced this opportunity to work on the wall. Some of the people seem to have some people, especially in churches, seem to have the gift of criticism. And I think it's probably one of those gifts that we all tend to dip our toes into from one time or another. And sometimes leaders just need to hear about issues. But just hearing about all the negative is not always helpful, especially if you expect your leader to fix the problem that you've been thinking about for months. If you see a problem, come with a solution. And even better is a person that's like, here's the problem, here's the solution, and I'll handle it. Awesome, golden. You do that. Thank you. That's what every boss wants. And that's what Nehemiah did here. There's a problem. I know the solution, and I have been given the authority by the king to fix it. Who's with me? Verses 19 through 20 says, and these guys are awesome. But when Sanballat the Horonite, Tobiah the Amorite official, and Geshem the Arab heard it, they laughed at us and despised us and said, "What is this thing that you are doing? Will you rebel against the king?" So I answered them and said, "The God of heaven himself will prosper us. Therefore we, his servants, will arise and build. But you have no heritage or right or memorial in Jerusalem." We've not seen the last of these guys. These guys are going to be a problem. But the great thing is Nehemiah has the right perspective. The first tactic that Satan uses is intimidation, ridicule, making fun of the leaders and his plans, laughing at them and belittling, the plan to rebuild. The second tactic is a false accusation of rebellion. And that worked in the past. You remember back in Ezra, they tried this once before, and it worked. It stopped the building of the temple for years. But they're dealing with a different guy here. Nehemiah would not be intimidated because he knew that God had planned this whole thing. Nehemiah did not give a point-by-point reply, which he could have. What is this thing you're doing? Well, we're building the wall. Are you going to rebel? Of course we're not going to rebel. That's stupid. Why would we rebel? He doesn't feel the need to answer all of their accusations. Instead, he comes at it with God's authority. Verse 20 again says, "So I answered them and said to them, the God of heaven himself will prosper us. Therefore, we, his servants, will arise and build. But you have no heritage or right or memorial in Jerusalem." What are they going to say to that? Oh yeah, well, that's dumb. What do you say? God is on our side. God has told us to do this. God is going to prosper us, and you have no heritage here. He didn't seem to need to feel like he had to address every point of contention. He knew these guys were just throwing barbs. They're just trying to get a rise out of him. They're just trying to frustrate their plans. And he's not having any of it. He didn't have to show the documents proving the king's support or the project. Any of the other responses to this would have led to more mocking. But what he did is he told them that this is God's problem, and that's it. We're done. You're no longer in our headspace. We're moving on. And I think that's, again, the mark of a good and wise leader. And he's going to need to do this a few more times before the wall's finished. So, next week we have probably one of the most riveting chapters in all of the Old Testament. Almost as riveting as Genesis chapter 5 that we did on Sunday. But there's gems. There's gems in there. So we'll mine them out. So let's go ahead and pray, and we'll call it a night. Lord Jesus, we just thank you for this evening. We thank you for leaders like Nehemiah who take you at your word, who stand strong against any kind of manipulation or intimidation. Lord, we ask that those are the traits that we would have, in a world that is getting more and more, I guess, combative towards you. Lord, I pray that we would just have the same resolve that Nehemiah did. Lord, I pray that you would just give us the strength and the wisdom to answer those questions, or to not answer those questions. Lord, I pray that you would just be watching over us as we go out this week. Lord, if there's things going on in our lives where we're being hassled, where our witness is being called into question, Lord, I pray that you would just give us the resolve, like Nehemiah, to just deal with it. Lord, we're on a mission from you, and nothing else matters. So, Lord, we just give you the rest of our night. Pray that you just protect these guys on their way home, and we just give you our fellowship in Jesus' name.